I have finished grading 6 of your exams, start to finish, and then the balance of the essays, the large essay at the end. And I have a few more comments. Okay. I think it's a pretty good start. The essay, really. But I would sincerely hope that when I ask you a similar question, worded a little differently, at the end of the course, that your response is thoroughly better than the current. We had responses that range from merely restating that all these things that I mentioned in the introduction to the question were important, and little else as to elaboration on what was important and what are you going to do differently, to very good definition of those items and everything in between. So what I'm thinking to do is to give any of you that got over 30 points on that 36-point essay extra credit for what you got over 30 points. And then on the next exam, probably on the last exam as well, give you an opportunity to replace what you put on this one with a much better score, hopefully, that you get with what you learned going forward. Okay? So, what I've put up on the board, we're going to talk about a little later. This is actually industrial stuff. This comes from Telegram, where I used to be the lead program manager, the senior project manager, and constructability technology chief, working with them to define standards. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and show you a video today to try to convince you that just having the recognition that these things like cost and productivity and quality are important, or even that behaviors associated with human motivation are important, they are insufficient. Okay? You've also got to define what constitutes process and individual or position performance that will give you what you want. If you don't go through the process, each one of these are standards associated with how to do something in the design of whatever KBR is designing. Okay? In fact, this is used for offshore oil rigs, it's used for pipelines, it's used for office buildings, it's used for civil structures. Basically, they go through about 80 to 90% the same process, no matter what they're designing and pre-planning for the project. And so it is with the construction. What actually is going through is custom, always different, but the process they go through is very much the same. And they recognize that they had to define what that process would be. And then they got to motivate people to do it, okay? And they got to govern by it. But until you have a process defined, you're not going to achieve the levels of excellence that are going to break out of this industry and differentiate your company from those that don't. Okay? I'm going to show you an example of that. But before I do, I want to not get too far ahead of myself. We prepared last Friday Wednesday, to be able to discuss what your conclusions were as a team when you met together, to define what you expect out of executives, out of management. And I'd like to have you go and assemble in those teams if you're not already there, and you should have had a spokesman ready to present that this morning. Okay? So we'll start with the team in the back here, and we'll just move forward from there. Jimmy, would you rotate that around, take a picture of him while he's recording? want your representative to stand up and tell us what your team came up with.
All right, we were trying to recap because it was a long time ago. The biggest thing was the growth opportunity and responsibility to be delegated to us right out of the gate, so that we could kind of perform what we've all learned in college and kind of hit the ground running and really take off with our work in the industry. So we wanted a boss that can give us that responsibility and those opportunities for growth. So
Okay.
when we are bosses, we plan to reflect what we want, but passing down that responsibility.
Okay.
Have trust in the younger generation to show what they've learned and actually do the work.
Okay, now let me give you a response as if I was Mr. Acton.
Mr. What?
Brian Acton, the fellow that spoke on Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, he says, the millennial generation wants responsibility far in excess of their experience or ability to perform. So how would you respond to that?
I would say it's per individual basis. You have to have that relationship between your boss and your employee and see what that individual is capable of doing and pass it on accordingly. You're not going to give everybody the same responsibility when they walk in the door, but some people can take off with more responsibility than others, but everybody wants some responsibility for that opportunity to grow. So I think that comes down to the relationship between boss and employee.
Okay, is it just a relationship that's required there, or is there something else that's going to have to be required?
Well, for a good relationship, you need communication, so you need that line of communication between the boss and employee too.
Okay. Okay, anybody else suggest what else is going to be required to be able to get that to be comfortably done by, I mean, we're talking vast resources here. We're talking time, we're talking company reputation, right? We're talking lives on the line. Okay? So is that just, you know, we got to trust them? Are we going to get to where we can trust them? You. Let's talk about the next team. Right here.
You said we want a boss that's organized, that prevents problems from happening. So it looks in the future, I guess, that just plans to prevent stuff from happening. And then we want a boss that sees value in their work. So if we're doing something, and like Joel was mentioning, he did something for his boss and kind of got yelled at in a way because he wouldn't. It was something that wasn't necessary, but he did it anyways just to help out because he knew it was important, but it wasn't important at that moment. So his boss asked him why he was working on it now and when he could be working on other stuff, I guess. So sees value in your work and then care for you as a person. So like personally, he wants to help you get better and advance in your career, I guess. And then we will want a when we're bosses, I guess, we will learn from our boss's mistakes now. So see what our boss is doing now and just build on that so we don't make the same mistakes as they do.
Okay, okay. So let's take that suggestion and apply it to the experience. If you were the boss and you saw somebody doing something differently, in the wrong order maybe, that wasn't as important as something else, what would you have done differently?
I can take this if you want. So instead of really reprimanding and scolding and things like that, maybe encouragement, actually being a mentor, an active mentor, instead of taking the back seat, being a passive disciplinarian.
Mm-hmm.
But also that also grows a culture that's not risk averse and they're willing to be creative and have their own ideas and being encouraged, positively encouraging them to take those risks allows them to grow faster and in a much more healthy way.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now let me give you an example of how bad it gets. Okay. On a project I was working on that was going very well, on schedule, very tight schedules with the stadium project. The owner of the company, what we called senior, okay, old gentleman that had grown the company from scratch, walks on the job site and he's walking around the job. And we don't find out about this until a foreman comes in And he burst into my office, and he puts his fist in the air, and he says, "Isn't there anyone that can get senior off this job?" And I said, "What are you talking about? What's going on?" And he says, "I just got my crew working on something, and it's on the critical path." Senior didn't even know what a critical path schedule was. And Senior walks over and tells the guys to go do something else, which in his opinion is most important. And I come back, and there's my crew off doing something else. I say, "What's going on?" And they say, "Senior signs the check. He told us to go do this." All that organization that the team was doing, using a new tool, CPM scheduling, was being completely ignored by that senior manager. And of course he had the authority, and so they were going to do it, right? Okay? And it just made his team extremely mad. Because they had this under control, he walks on and uses his authority to mess things up, right? Okay? Okay, very good. Let's go to the next team.
So we've got 5 points for your best management tactics. Number one is to create a positive environment and motivate people to see their self-potential and their full potential. Number two, being readily available and tactically setting up delegated responsibilities for other leaders over subgroups so that you have a chain of command that works very efficiently, so you're not always having to strenuously stress yourself out when the other people are in charge of other things they shouldn't be organizing, so you have more time to focus on the important tasks at hand. Number three, organization is critical. They've all mentioned that so far. Having checklists, looking to get things done point by point, and being creative and innovative by how you schedule these and working together and collaborating on tasks getting done side by side or one after another, and making sure people know what has to be done in a chain of command. Number four, work packaging. So ideally allowing for your tasks to be well-defined, systematically prepared, and allows for clear communication, meaning less waste on non-productive activities. Number five, allow people to dream and work in their most ideal place when possible. Sometimes it's not going to work out well, sometimes you have to have them in a certain area, but allow them to add their touch to it and work in the planning as best as possible, because that's going to allow them to have more ownership on their work. With that, it means, so one of the things to add in was anchor in heavy mentorship programs and allow the youth, as you mentioned before, when BMWC talked about like the millennials wanting to step up, so allow the youth to challenge themselves and find critical ways to add to their learning process so that they're taking in knowledge so that they can take that step up. If that's something that motivates them, or go into a position where they can kind of move into some specific tasks.
Okay, thank you. Would you type that up and send it to Young? And I'd like to send it out to the entire team. That's a really good summary that encases some of the things that have been said by others. Now, let's put yourself now for a minute in the shoes of senior. You walk on the job site, you don't understand everything going on and some advanced system that you've heard about, but come on. Anyway, I've been managing projects since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, right? And I see something that needs to be done. It's obvious to me it needs to be done, and I'm experienced, I know, right? So what do you have to refrain yourself from doing and go do instead? Because you're a manager, because you're a leader, you're not a, a tyrant, if you will. What should he have done? Yes?
Well, you're not supposed to be like, this isn't your side anymore, I know what's best. You're supposed to, sort of take his input and see where he's coming from. Try to maybe explain to him maybe from a point of view that you would get, where you're coming from. Try to get him to understand.
Very good, very good. We don't want to lose all of that experience, do we? We want to put that to work. But in order to put it to work effectively and not alienate your people, you've got to be willing to reframe yourself. When the natural tendency is just to tell people what to do, right? To go and do exactly what you said. Go ask questions and the kind of things that you said and that you have said, okay? You've got to be willing to do what's not natural, okay? and go and ask questions, maybe leading questions, right? So that you understand, and they then, well, why didn't you do this first? Well, because this and this. Oh, well, maybe I should have done that first. Okay, so you get the experience of both built into the plan going forward. And don't just, figure whether you're the young generation or you're the old generation. Get united. Get the benefit of both sets of experience. The enthusiasm of the youth and the desire to build that. The desire to excel rather than squelch. That make sense? Okay, let's go to the next group here. Were you with what group? Is this next group? They're all together.
Okay, so we talked about a lot of similar things that other groups talked about. One of the main ones we said is we want a boss that's organized because they have to be able to get their work done and then delegate to us what work to get done. And if they're not organized, then they won't know what we can do and what they can't do. Another thing we talked about was having a boss that gives us work to do and then trusts in our ability, but not just trusts, learns that we do have the ability, so they start by giving us something easy to do, and then we gain their trust as we work on, and they learn that yes, we can. So we want a boss that's open to working with us and not just stuck in his ways, because we do have new ideas. Okay, cool. I think that was the main things we talked about.
Okay, so if we're going to do that, if we're going to get those ideas and decide what to do, we got to do that before we just go start doing it, don't we? We got to build those ideas into plans that are actually going to get executed. Okay? This is something that I remember when we were implementing this on a $500 million project up in the tar sands area in northern Alberta. And we had been doing it now for about a month, maybe 2 months. And it was going very well. We were accelerating the schedule. We were going ahead of schedule significantly, weeks ahead of schedule. Okay? And here comes an area manager. And he comes into my office and he closes the door. He sits down and he sits in the chair. And he leans back and he says, "Bob, I love coming to work in the morning." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he says, "Because I'm finally building what I know into a plan that actually gets executed." And that has not been my experience. He was fighting fires all the time. What he knew didn't, just like you have this enormous desire to prove yourself and to get things to work right and to apply your knowledge that you gain at the university and in your experience, the older people have that same desire. And the systems that we provide don't give them the opportunity to do that. Unless we're breaking down this big elephant into small pieces that we can define well and get every one of them to be executed consistently and reliably. And building what our people know, whether they're old, young, or in between, into those standards from which we derive the sequences and also the best practices that we develop around our tasks. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go to the next one.
So our main takeaway we wanted from a leader was somebody that will lead you by example, not necessarily a boss, somebody that will show you what to do and not just tell you what to do, someone that's like seen, not heard. We thought that someone who can delegate tasks comes from that, because if they're in the field, they know what's going on, they can effectively delegate tasks to people that are most confident and know who should be doing what at what times to be most efficient on the project. Then becoming a leader, we thought that to take away from different leaders we've had with their internships, to take what we like and don't like from each one, to morph those into your own leadership style to be the most effective leader.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Okay, next.
So
challenging us as an individual and put us in uncomfortable situations where we haven't necessarily seen or done what our boss wants us to do, but to get us out there, get us experienced, and have us figure out creative solutions to those problems. And then the kind of boss, or how we become that kind of boss, learning from experience is a great way, but then we also said gaining a mentor with the attributes we want and really studying under them and becoming very close with them in order to gain their knowledge to help you become a future boss.
Okay, very good. Okay, now let me suggest that a system like this right here is like a corporate brain. It's like the ultimate knowledge base of what constitutes the experience and expertise of the company, made available to the people that need to learn how to do this in the sequence that they're going to need to do it. It's going to start at the very beginning, earliest phase of the project. It's going to say, what do we expect from a client so that we can get started? This is what the client has to give us before we even get started. If this isn't available, then we got to work with them and get it done so that we can start our process as well. Okay? And every one of these has a description of who's going to do it and what's going to happen in order to, how do we know when it's done? Okay, how long does it take? How do you estimate that? Okay, and then we're going to start and we're going to go through our process. And this is how we do our pre-feed stage, these are the various stages of pre-project engineering and planning, technology selection, and definition of the project so that you can get ready for detailed design. By the time you get clear down to here, you're ready to go through the final bidding and for engineering. We're not even into detailed engineering yet. Okay? And then we got a whole other one that we start with detailed engineering and goes through construction. And this is only partially completed. Okay? That'll take us all the way. Now the derivation of that is an enormously powerful means to transfer knowledge from those who have the experience to those who desperately need that to be able to creatively solve additional problems. They know what has already been solved and how to do things in the order they ought to be done. Does that make sense? And then these principles of mentoring, come to me and I'll explain what that means. Okay? But we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not asking you to go out and invent how to do something. We're giving you the benefit of everything that our company has derived over decades. Right? You can learn that quickly. Ask questions to your mentor. And then you can use your creative skills to say, how do we improve that further? And we'll listen. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'd like each of you to type up what you came up with, send it in to Jiang, and Jiang, I'd like you to summate and fire it back out to the teams. Because I think all of these are excellent things. I want you to stick that away, and every once in a while you go back to it and say to yourselves, am I getting ready to do this? And add to it as you experience things. I mean, look at your bosses, look at the behaviors you see and say, hey, what do I want to become? Where does this lead? Where does that lead? And make your list of things you're going to become and why. It's so important. So you don't forget that. When you get to be old and you're leading this industry, you can go back and say, you know what? When I was young, I wanted some responsibility. So how did you give it to me? Well, I give it to you with understanding of how the best practices of the past, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. We talked about the reactive criteria. that if you're just waiting for somebody to come to you and say, hey, you know, I got a problem, and you're not anticipating that beforehand with an employee, for example, what pay they need to be paid. Now a competitor's trying to steal them away, and it's your best pipe fitter, or it's your best, you know, carpenter. Okay? You're not waiting for that to happen, and him concluding you don't really care, you're just reacting to, you know, the only way to get a, you know, a raise around here is to have somebody else offer you a better pay, right? That doesn't motivate anybody. He's liable just to leave in spite of you. Okay? So things that cause problems over time, people in the same firm doing the same work for different pay. If it's not systematic, if it's reactive, that's exactly what you're going to end up with. Range of compensation for a given job category, not based on performance, right? Based on what you have to pay to be able to retain them. Okay? Performance rankings will focus people on what you measure. Rewarding one thing while hoping for something else, not going to give you what you want. Okay? Rewarding people when they get a, you know, an offer from somewhere else. Is that what you want? Everybody have to go out and find out what the other guy's willing to pay? Or do you want them focused on getting their job done? Okay, you're going to have to do some compensation surveys then, aren't you? Systematic comparison. Problems occur when you're defining job, analyzing the value, benefits, incomplete data. In those, that's challenging, but it's used extensively. Government agencies do it. We determine surveys. Brian again talked about the fact that the government has historically liked to do that and specify it on government-supported work, particularly federally supported work, using the Davis-Bacon laws. They're going to issue a statement as to what the rates are to be paid on the project, right? We talked about that. Okay, so that's going away, isn't it? More and more states are no longer doing that. Okay, it could be adjusted based on some formula. Typical would be a cost of living adjustment based on some index, like the Consumer Price Index, okay? The history and the economic influences of escalators, okay? An escalator is a clause in a contract that says, okay, I mean, some of these contracts are very long. For example, a project that's multi-billion dollars can be 5 to 7 years long. Okay? As an owner, do you want to have the contractor take the risk that is estimate conservatively what, you know, the prices are going to be for labor way down the road? Or do you want to build something into the contract that when some index goes up, it automatically increases the labor component of the project, or maybe material components as well, what, you know, an increase would be? Okay? It's a risk transfer mechanism, if you will. Okay, some people believe that's inflationary. If you build those things in, then, you know, sometimes you say, okay, well, we're going to give you a 3% increase over time. Well, that in itself, if it's a, you know, a big enough section of the economy that's doing it, can cause inflation. Okay, it also, oftentimes they end up permanently causing a wage increase, when really what's going on is the market is